Her story deals with a subculture of heavy metal music that some feel is sending a dangerous message to your kids.
The forces of evil on the dark side of devil right.
And I want to talk tonight about the devil and demons and witches and wizards.
And we just mix it up with hardcore and aggression and come out with something we think is an original sound.
Loud, fast, heavy, you know.
Well, what do you got?
What do you got?
You're listening to Riff Worship, the podcast that attempts to answer the age-old question, what is a riff? What makes a riff? Why do we care so much about the riff? I'm one of your hosts, Austin Paulson. With me, as always, is my illustrious co-host, the great Baldini, Dylan Adams. Dylan, how are you, buddy?
Doing good, bud. How are you?
Oh, I'm great. We have a wonderful guest with us today. He's a writer, a songwriter, a father, so many things, curmudgeon even. One of my favorite, if that, this new record is out now through Profound Lore Records. I'm, of course, talking about Runer. I'm, of course, talking about Neill Jameson of Krieg. Neill, how are you, buddy?
Curmudgeonly, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for joining us. I guess the first question I'd like to ask you, as a person who has pretty much spent most of their adult life in music, even, probably in your teens, listening to music incessantly, what to you makes a riff? What, you've probably been exposed to a lot of great riffs, a lot of bad riffs, but what is it about a riff that gets you hooked? What is it about a riff that draws you in?
That's a really good question. Authenticity of feeling. A riff doesn't have to be super technical to be interesting to me, but I also am not going to say that it has to just be, primitive and primal and all that. There just has to be something to it that really catches an emotion in me. That could be anything. It could be something that's super depressing, something that is really harsh and caustic, or something that even is, uplifting.
There's a lot of that on this record, I think. Yes. Runer, lots of abrasive riffs, lots of, I would say it's a pretty straightforward record. By all accounts, I think some of the influences that I've heard you talk about in interviews kind of leading up to this record, I think there's a lot of maybe influences that you perhaps were into growing up and getting into riffs or getting into music. Do you remember some of the first riffs that you learned? Maybe something that you were like, I have to pick up a guitar and try to play this.
So, I tried to take lessons when I was younger, and that just never really worked out. I kind of just, I don't have a mathematical mind at all. And so the majority of the lessons would just be me bringing in a CD and trying to get my guitar teacher to show me how to play certain riffs. This is going way, way back, even before I had any inclination to start writing my own stuff. But I would have him show me, like, Typo Negative was a real big one for me. Danzig, Misfits, that kind of stuff. We're going back to like freshman, sophomore in high school kind of thing. So at the time, it was just really like I was really absorbing a lot of different music. And so I kind of wanted to channel that into being able to play it myself. Other people's music anyway. Again, I didn't have too much of an inclination that I was going to be, wasting the next 30 years of my life doing this, but it was, definitely just something that I was never big into sports. I really like art, but I can't draw for shit. So music was really, that was kind of what was going to lead me to express my personality when I was that age.
Do you find that some of the influences perhaps around this time, are you still kind of, I feel like when I hear the record, I feel like I hear some like maybe older kind of Norwegian influence. Do you feel like, are you still able to kind of bring or take from those influences? I feel like I hear a lot of that on this record in particular, Runer.
That's absolutely the biggest influence on this record. This record was pretty much me going back to a time when I first really got into black metal. So obviously, like the touchstones were the early Norwegian scene, especially in the mid-90s. It was kind of difficult to really hear about things unless you were in a city or you knew people. And so all of my exposure came very slowly through a college radio station, and through that then I started ordering from like the Relapse catalog and just anything that said black metal, I was trying to pick up. And so, like me and my friends at the time, super big into, Dark Throne, Emperor, Gorgoroth. And I kind of, I lost that for a while, 20 years or so where, I was just kind of just all over the place. And then sometime last year, I guess like last summer, I just decided that I was going to re-listen to things from my youth and see if there's anything that I heard new from it. And what was really surprising to me was how much of an influence that Gorgoroth had on Krieg over the last 30 years, of just the riff style, some of the progressions, and the overall atmosphere. And so, I was listening to a lot of Gorgoroth. Still do. I listen to at least 1 or 2 records a week. And so that really kind of propelled me into writing new stuff. And it was really just like I wanted to write a record that I would have wanted to hear when I was younger, when I was getting into all this kind of stuff. And so Ruiner definitely has all of its influences very proudly on its sleeve. I'm not trying to do anything different or innovative. One of points of consternation for me is, I read reviews and they're like, the album's great, but they're really not doing anything innovative. And it's like, that's not the point at all. To be doing something that, is pushing boundaries or anything like that. I mean, the fact that journalists need to constantly want you to be trying to do something new is just ludicrous. You just, you want to continue to do what is authentic to you and honest. And this record is probably the most honest thing, that I could have possibly done. It's basically just me trying to write a black metal record from my youth.
Right. It's, it's funny to go back and listen to records you listened to as a kid or that you listened to in your formative years, right? When your brain's kind of a melting pot for anything that you're interested in, doesn't matter. As long as it's good, you're going to listen to it. And you kind of go through these different phases in life where maybe you try to prove yourself a little bit more. Maybe you're trying to go, well, I don't want it to sound like any of that stuff that I listened to growing up, or that I don't want it to sound just like that. And then you end up writing years later from a perspective of like just firing from the gut, right? You're just writing from the gut. There's nothing there that you have to hit on. You're just pulling straight from that. And it sounds like all those influences you have as a kid. You realize like, oh, wait, I don't have to reinvent the wheel. I can just write something that's really good and is good to me, as something that I want to hear, like when I listen to something new.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's in my own personal listening. I mean, sure, I'm interested in bands that are doing different and unusual things. I'll always try to, give that sort of thing a listen. But I mean, for the most part, like I said, starting off, like I'm interested in authenticity in the music and the art
Right.
that I consume. And so if that means that somebody's going to go back and basically do the same album over and over and over again, that's fine if it's good. I mean, look at Motorhead. Motorhead was fantastic. The Ramones basically did the same record for, their entire career.
We were just talking about this with, we mentioned all those bands. We had like an episode on Ringworm, for instance. It's like they've made pretty much the same thing for the past like 20 years, and it's been pretty damn good. Like they just kind of perfected their thing.
It's because they're doing what's honest to them instead of, pandering to what, like, I don't want to use like, the cliche black metal language of, talking about trends and all that. But I mean, it really is just pandering sometimes to market pressure. And so bands like Ringworm that are just, steamrolling along and doing their thing. All Out War is kind of similar to that too, where they're just really just pounding away at their own thing. I mean, that's far better to me than listening to some band that is trying to combine avant jazz and noise and black metal and pop punk and all these, just like this amalgamation of things because they think that that's what's going to get them some kind of notoriety. I mean, these kinds of things come and go. You look at like the late 90s when the black metal got quote unquote weird, and there's just a lot of bands. Sure, they did a lot of bands did some really classic stuff, but then there's just certain bands kind of hopped on that, or they would hop on to like the trying to sound like Dimmu Borgir when Dimmu was really big when they first signed to Nuclear Blast, or just these things that are just completely career minded, and you really don't hear about these bands anymore. Whereas you'll hear about bands that have remained honest and authentic and sincere over, the bands that tried to push some kind of envelope because they thought that would benefit their career more. And that's just hardly the case. I mean, the listening public is definitely fickle, but I don't think that they're stupid, at least the majority of them. And so I feel that people can kind of suss out when there's that insincerity. And sure, it may be a shiny new toy off the bat, but does that do you desire repeat listens to that kind of thing? Do you crave, the riffs that are on there? Are you humming it along, or are you thinking about, you know, some band that is doing just, fantastic, honest, sincere music that, may or may not be pushing any kind of envelope?
You mentioned sincere. It when I listen to this record, I've listened to it, quite a bit over the past couple weeks, and one thing I can say for sure that it feels sincere. And even just listening to you now kind of talk about maybe the state that you're in, the kind of the mindset you're in, it seems that you're just doing exactly what you would want to be doing at this point. And, maybe, these kinds of questions that we're talking about, like with sincerity, or maybe these pressures, these outside pressures that, with labels and fans or whoever's like critics and whatnot, there's a lot of pressure that can be put on a band. And, it sounds like maybe that perhaps may have been a little bit of a problem maybe a few years ago after the release of Transient. I feel like that's kind of why this was maybe more or less delayed for a while. Maybe I'm saying this wrong, but there is a pressure sometimes on artists to like meet expectations. Did you find yourself having to like want to meet expectations after the release of Transient? Is that, I don't know, I feel like I've read that a little bit, and excuse me for kind of rambling there.
No, you're right on the money. Yeah, there's a lot of pressure because, we signed literally like 5 minutes after our contract Candlelight expired, we signed the deal with Profound Lore in 2015. And so, you signed to a very prestigious label. And at that point, I mean, our quote unquote career was accelerating. We were doing, like, we opened up for I Hate God in Philly, and, we're just doing like bigger, quote unquote, bigger shows. And I think that kind of lost a little bit of what made Krieg, important to me, because I was really focusing on a lot of that stuff. And then we talked about, like, hey, why don't we do like a album that sounds like mid-period Killing Joke, or not mid-period because that's the like Beyond the Gates kind of stuff, but like the 90s to early 2000s Killing Joke, something like that. And then, we were gonna go to God City and record there. And I mean, we talked to Kurt a few times and tried to set up dates. And there's just like this idea of like this grandiose, like, hey, this is going to be the career maker, which is kind of ridiculous because band had already been around for 15 or 20 years or so at the time. And so there just started being all this pressure. Like, one, I love Transient. It's my favorite record that I've done. I think The Ruiner is the best record we've done, but Transient's my favorite. And so it always kind of bummed me out that Candlelight really dropped the ball with it, and the record just kind of fizzled out. And so I was putting all this pressure on myself to make a better record than that at the time. And so, I mean, I was writing constantly. I have, tons and tons and tons of on my hard drive, just videos of ideas and riffs and all that. And I mean, some of them are all right, but it just wasn't good. Like, if I would have done a record right after Transient with that kind of stuff, it would have been the end of the band. I mean, it was just not inspired. And I was really like, I was writing for something that wasn't myself. I was trying to make this huge record. And so, the years kept going, and, we were doing fests and all that kind of stuff, and just wasn't going anywhere. And meanwhile, in American black metal, you see all these, smaller bands that are just getting big fan bases and, all these accolades and all that. And I was just getting really kind of petty and jealous about it. And so that right there, that was really weighing on me. So I really just kind of gave up on black metal altogether for a while. And then, I had a few years of, money wasn't good. I moved to Richmond. Everybody else is in Philly. So, trying to get together and do things was difficult. The show offers just kind of dropped off. then my girlfriend got sick. She had stage 4 lung and brain cancer. And so that really took precedence. And once she was cleared of that, and then all of a sudden, we found out that we were expecting a kid. And that really all kind of just helped me focus in on things. It made me, one, like between her being sick and COVID, like we were pretty much just stuck in the house for most of the time. I mean, I worked through COVID, so just business as usual for me. But we weren't really going out and doing anything. So I started checking out YouTube channels again and reading about like modern black metal and seeing what was out there, and actually starting to get really interested in it. And so like all the Danish Corpse and Circle bands, like that really, like that reignited my passion for black metal. And so then I just started writing again, and we did the Split with Crucifixion Bell. That was kind of like dipping our toes back into seeing what would happen. And then we were going to do a few more splits, and then it just all kind of organically came together. And we were able to do a record that the only expectations that I had for it was, is it going to be something that I would want to listen to? And that was pretty much it. Any ideas of us going out and making something of ourselves, I mean, no one cares about that. We're all, middle-aged at this point. Everybody has families and jobs and all that. So our primary reason for continuing with Krieg is because we love doing it, which is what should be and should have been my motivation the entire time. And a lot of that got lost in between industry pressure, industry nonsense, drug use, mental illness, all that kind of stuff. Like I really lost focus on what was important. And so I've spent the last few years getting that back. And, now we have a record to talk about.
It seems like, I can speak for myself and maybe Dylan a little bit here, where there's, it's not unheard of for a band to kind of really meticulously kind of write songs, maybe even months prior. But from what I understand, a lot of this record was written perhaps like maybe days before you guys were doing sessions for this record, correct?
Hours.
Yeah, wild. So, I mean, just to even kind of push forward that theme of sincerity and just it feeling natural, that's so cool to hear.
It was weird because, I mean, like I knew that I was going to be going to Philly in September to record. We were going to do 3 songs. This could be a first split with Withdrawal. And so I had all this time to like write and prepare and all that. And I mean, I'm just a consummate fuck up. So I waited until the last minute. It was literally the night before I left, and I sat down and I wrote 3 songs in an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Yeah.
That I was really happy with. And that was Bulwark, Red Rooms, and No Gardens Grow here. And so I went to Philly, we recorded it. We sent the 3 tracks off to Alex Poole, who added all of his, layer upon layer of leads and all that. And it just kind of felt like, wow, this is different. This isn't a split. This is, what we could turn this into a record. So let's get back together in January. And so again, had months to prepare to do the additional 5 songs. I always knew I wanted to do 8 songs for the record. No, didn't. The night before, 2 hours, wrote all 5. There was maybe 2 riffs that I wrote in studio the day of, and that was it. I mean, that's kind of how I used to do things. I mean, most of Destruction Ritual was written in the studio. Most of Rise of the Imperial Hordes was in studio. Black House, we wrote that a few days before. I mean, there was like 3 or 4 songs that were done prior to, but we wrote that a few days before we went into the studio. So, I mean, all of the stuff that is, I mean, I don't really like Rise of the Imperial Hordes anymore, but like a lot of my stuff that is considered quote unquote classic, I mean, it was all written kind of off the cuff. And so that's, kind of a return to that. And it was just completely natural. And the whole reason for it is because I just can't get my life together sometimes. And I'm managing a bunch of competing priorities between work and fatherhood and everything else. So I really, like, what I wrote should have sucked because I had a time crunch and I had pressure to write, and I just didn't feel that way. I was just writing, kind of what I really wanted to write. Like I was thinking about my influences and going places that I normally wouldn't with Krieg, like, like some higher register stuff, some more triumphant stuff, some more kind of gallopy Drew Kate Forest kind of stuff, like just things that like I really love in my own listening time that I've kind of never allowed myself to do in Krieg prior. And so it just kind of opened up the floodgates.
now one of the questions I always like to ask too, since it's been some time, I mean, even I know you had released, obviously some splits and collaborations, but by all accounts, it kind of sounds like a lot of that stuff was even written back in 2014. Like I think, the Integrity split came out in 2018, correct? And that you may have been even sitting on for a little bit.
2014 for that. The body collaboration was done in 2013, I think.
Wow.
Any of the splits and stuff that came out like right after Transient or around 2014, I mean, that was all done 2013 and 2014. The Circle of Guilt, the first song on the Integrity split, that was the last thing that we recorded until 2021.
With that said, and all this time had passed, and now the record's out, people have been listening to it. How does it feel? Like, I mean, you've released albums before in the past. Like, how does it feel now it's out there in the world? It sounds like you feel really proud of it. Is it just like a weight off of your shoulders?
No, not really. It's weird. Like if I would have shelved it and nobody else would have heard it besides, those of us who were involved, I would have been fine with that because there was just like that kind of record where I was that happy with it. But the response so far, I mean, it's been really humbling. People are really seem to be latching onto it and digging it. And it's the best response that we've had of anything since Black House came out 20 years ago.
Wow.
Just a lot of really positive, nice things that people are saying that I really appreciate. It also shows me like how many people have really stuck around and, that have been Krieg fans since even like the 90s and all that, because they're reaching out to me and telling me that. And it's just been really, really cool. It's been a very pressure-free experience. The only thing that's been kind of weird is, the last time I did a press cycle was 9 years ago. So basically I would just do email interviews and the occasional phoner. And this time around, I'm doing podcasts and, that's the majority of what I'm doing, which is awesome. But I've also figured out, like, it was difficult initially. Fortunately, I did kind of a smaller one when I was getting my feet wet with it, where, I would, like a lot of that kind of shit where I just sounded stupid. And then, I kind of, now I just sound like I'm an old man rambling. But the one thing that this has taught me is I really enjoy talking about myself, and I absolutely will extend the length of almost any podcast I'm on until whoever I'm with tells me to shut the fuck up and it's time to go.
I love it. No, we've been fans for a long time. And so, just see what like the trends in like tech and, digesting information like this. Like I wouldn't have thought I'd be in college doing the radio station or doing a podcast with my friend who I've known for years, and just we basically did this by ourselves like all the time. So the fact that we get to talk to you about this is really, really, really cool. You also have some live shows coming up. How long has it been since you've gotten on stage and played in front of people?
Oh, Jesus Christ. The last time we played was September 2017. We played the Red River Family Fest in Austin.
Oh, well, okay.
So yeah, I mean, it's been quite a while. And gotta say, these shows have been an absolute nightmare to put together. Just this morning, Cathedrals in the Night, who were supposed to be playing in New York and Philly, they broke up.
Oh no!
So now I'm scrambling to find replacements in both cities. And New York City this time around, like the last time I played in New York was 2014 with the Banner and Outer Heaven.
Mm-hmm. Oh wow!
I was 2015 actually, and that was great. That was an easy show to line up. The lineup obviously ruled. I mean, I was huge fans of both bands, and like I've never had a hard time getting a lineup before. Whereas I've asked so many bands for New York City, they're like, they just can't do it.
Damn.
Like we tried to get Whoa because Chris just put out a new record, but he doesn't have a live lineup that's ready right now. And literally everybody else was like, oh, sorry, man, we're playing the weekend before or we're playing the weekend after. And so I was really stoked to get Cathedrals in the Night to do their first shows because I thought that their demo a few years ago was fantastic. And then with them breaking up this morning, I mean, like I'm glued to my phone trying to, see who we can get in there to replace them. Philly's a little bit easier. I mean, we know tons of bands there, so I've got no problems there. But it's just, I guess I need like a booking agent or something. I mean, like the logistics this time around are just, it's a nightmare.
I'm curious to know what else has changed like majorly as far as like the the music industry, or perhaps even just aside from like booking shows, is there anything else that you've noticed within the past year? Maybe even like the turnaround on records, I would imagine has been, I know a lot of stress on a lot of people. Was the turnaround time getting these records in your hand, like physically, like was that difficult at all with Profound Lore?
No, Profound Lore had it locked down. I mean,
Good.
the record was finished in February. And so, we sent it to Chris, who wasn't even expecting us to be doing a record. I mean, we hadn't talked about it in a long time. And he was like, okay, the plant says that we can get it by this date. So we'll do October 13th as the release date. And it was smooth sailing the whole way. Because I was a little, there's a little bit of anxiety there because any of the split stuff I've done, like we were supposed to be the Crucifixion Bell split's supposed to be out on vinyl, and I mean that the CD for that came out over a year ago. The vinyl, we have no idea when. The turnaround time on vinyl is absolutely brutal. It doesn't really affect me very much, but I feel for smaller labels because vinyl's expensive. I mean, even more so now than when I ran a label. And so they're basically tying up thousands and thousands of dollars for a year or more, waiting for something to come out. And so, I mean, the stress on them is got to be nuts. As far as like the changes in the industry, major labels have been sucking up the smaller labels pretty much. And when I say major labels, I mean like the major conglomerates. Like when I get a royalty check for Relapse from the Integrity split, that's from Sony. When Candlelight sends me a bill because they say I still owe, I think we're at like 700 euros for the two records. That bill comes from Universal. Granted, I don't have to pay it. I mean, it's Universal Europe. So, what are they going to do? Take me to court for a few hundred euros? But so all the like the quote unquote bigger labels outside of Profound Lore, fortunately Chris owns everything there. They're all owned by Universal and Sony, and that's what's really changed, because all the bands that got signed to Candlelight at the time that I did, none of us are ever going to see our records again. Whoa, Corpus Christi. Trying to think of some of the other ones. I mean, they went on like a major signing spree in like 09, 10. And so all of these records are out of print, right? But they won't sell any of us the rights to it, but they won't repress it. So they're just kind of holding on to it. And that, I don't know if that's changed in the industry. I imagine that that's always been the case with major labels and smaller bands, but that's new to me and new to pretty much everybody who I'm in contact with that has been affected by it. Just this overabundance of people in suits making decisions that are, one, kind of asinine. I mean, you'd think they'd want to make money off of the things they're holding on to. And two, it's just weird to see that creep into black metal. I mean, I know that punk has experienced that for, decades now. But black metal is not really, as, I don't want to say as accessible as punk, because punk really shouldn't be accessible. At least the good stuff isn't. But it's weird to see what a business everything has turned into. And I guess it always was, but I was just operating at a level where I wasn't really, like, I was doing handshake agreements and that kind of thing.
I want to shift gears, if I may, because we did have you pick out a riff, and I'm very curious about this because I'll be honest, this is not a band that I had a lot of prior knowledge about, and I know now that they were maybe about 20 miles west of where I'm located in the suburbs of Chicago. Judas Iscariot. I feel like there's a lot of history here, especially in your life and your musical journey. If you were to describe this project to maybe someone like me who really doesn't know anything, how would you, maybe in a quick blurb, like what would you describe Judas Iscariot to?
One of the 5 most important American black metal bands, one of the most important underground bands in the world underground scene that still is considered to be that. Really, one man black metal before that was kind of a thing. Just really dark, dreary, purpose-driven, atmospheric without being orchestral. just really pivotal in my life and a lot of other people's lives, especially coming up around the time that I did. And yeah, he was from DeKalb. So
This probably goes back to maybe your teenage years. You grew up in New Jersey,
mhm.
and I had read that maybe you started a zine with some high school friends, and maybe like a precursor to your column now. Did you come into contact with Andy through the zine, trying to like? I know he was in Sarcophagus. Is that maybe like the first time you kind of had your first interactions with Andy?
So growing up in Ocean City, Jersey, we had a record store that was on the boardwalk, and it was only open during the summer. It was called Tunes on the Dunes. And one year, I guess it was 95 actually, 95 and 96, both years, they had somebody there that knew black metal. And so they would order like all this weird underground stuff. Uh, and they would have it in a box that was behind the counter. It was like, almost like you're buying pornography. And one of the things that they had was the first Sarcophagus album, For We Are Consumed by the Darkness. And so I picked that up because I was like, oh, it's an American band. The pictures were ridiculous. I mean, the corpse paint pictures of them when they were younger is just it was a source of a lot of ribbing over the years with any of the members that I knew from that era. They were one of two American bands that were assigned to, how was it, Pulverize, I think. That had been death metal bands that then transformed into black metal bands, Deteriorate being the other one. And so like I was really fascinated by like, here's an American band doing this kind of stuff that I was mostly just used to Europeans doing. And Andy had his email address. It was I think it might have actually been the college email address. And so I reached out to him, and we sent a few emails back and forth around then, and kind of stayed like slightly in touch with him. But then I guess later in 96, the first Judas Iscariot record came out on Moribund, and I picked it up, and I had no idea that it was the same guy until I looked at the pictures, and I was like, oh, this, very, very similar. And, I thought it was a cool record, Cold Earth Slept Below, but it wasn't like something that really like absolutely caught me. What really got me was then a few months later when The Dying Light and Of Great Eternity, both those records came out concurrently, one on Moribund and one on Elegy. And they were just both like such massive steps up in the project. And I was hooked. I was like, oh my God, this is just brilliant. It was like a more grand, I don't want to say grand. It was a darker Dark Throne.
Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely like a lot of like, the Norwegian influence in there. Mm-hmm. You could also hear like, some of the Polish influence as well. And so I eventually ran into him. Like we talked once or twice online, but I ran into him at Milwaukee Metal Fest in 98. And that's really what started my friendship with him. And then he became, a very important person for Krieg, because he was kind of who gave me entrance into Europe. I mean, he's who, lined up our first 2 tours over there.
Wow.
He gave Krieg a legitimacy at a time when American black metal really didn't have any. And then I was fortunate enough, I did live bass for Judas in both live shows, the 1999 Sacrifice of the Nazarene Child in San Antonio, and then the Under the Black Sun Fest in Germany in 2000.
Yeah, and that was like it, right? He didn't play anything after that, correct?
Nope, he did maybe 1 or 2 more albums, and then Judas ended. He ended after 10 years, and then he started doing some other projects, 2 of which I was able to release on my label, Desolation Hymn and Debauchery.
Wow.
He also did Flagellator and Torrent, and then he just kind of, there's some issues where, so his father was a judge out in DeKalb, and
really,
so politics kind of crept up where like his father was trying to go for higher office, and somebody pulled out, well, here's your kid, and here's some of the fucked up things that he said.
Yeah.
And so that pressure kind of just made him say, screw it, I'm not going to be releasing anything publicly anymore. He joined Krieg for a while. He was on Black House, and he did a few tours with us in Europe. And then at one point, I mean, he just disappeared. I've seen him maybe twice in the last, almost 20 years.
Wow.
We played in Chicago with Broken Hope and Weekend Nachos in 2013.
Wow.
at Harm's Way, which was awesome,
Yeah.
on Black Friday that year. And he
Wow.
popped up because he was in town visiting his family. And I saw him at one of the Maryland Death Fests as well. And outside of that, I mean, I have absolutely no contact with him whatsoever. And in the last few years, I mean, people have started really trying to like bootleg all of his old records. And for a while, since I was kind of the only quote unquote public face of the band anymore, like I was doing my best to try to stop the bootlegging and all that. And then at one point I was just like, man, why do I care? I mean, like, it's not my legacy to uphold. And, I don't talk to him anymore. Like he doesn't find it, important to converse with any of his old friends. So, at that point I was like, all right, well, let people buy shitty bootlegs if they want. And now people are buying shitty bootlegs because they want it. So
this album in particular, like I think you mentioned earlier, I mean, it's like it seems very hard. Obviously we're kind of in an age where it's easier to stream things. I think, I saw like maybe Moribund had like maybe reissued this like digitally, this record in particular. How did you find, like, was it just coming through those same zines, or like, who would you ask? Who would you like go to find something like this?
at that point in time, I was buying from a distro called Dark Symphonies.
Okay.
That is still Dark Symphonies now. He's reopened that, but he also does the Crypt and does a whole bunch of like old school death metal reissues that Dark Descent will do. I think that Dark Descent does their distribution. But back in the 90s, Dark Symphonies was like, that was the place to get your black metal in the States. And so he would have a catalog and it would, descriptions on everything. And, I was a kid, so I had disposable income. So I was just buying things left and right that sounded cool. And like you would have to call up and place an order. You wouldn't do it, through email or anything like that. So like I would call up to Dark Symphonies and talk to Ted and ask him like, hey, like, what I like, what can you recommend? And I would just kind of blind buy. And that's how, I came into the first Judas record.
Wow.
And then when I saw the other two were released, I liked the first one enough that I was like, okay, I'll get both of these. And then that was like the revelation right there.
Awesome. And you mentioned that it's kind of funny to hear that, Milwaukee Metal Fest interaction, especially now that it's kind of had this like rebirth, in the past year or so. Did you met Mayhem at that same interaction as well? You hung out with them for a little bit?
So that was the first time I ever got snuck into a bar underage. Milwaukee Metal Fest used to be done at the Eagles Ballroom.
Yes.
And so across the street from there is, I can't remember what the name of the hotel is. It's the one where Dahmer killed his first victim.
It's, I wrote it, the Ambassador Hotel.
That's it. Yep.
Yeah.
So the Ambassador Bar used to be like, that would be where you would go. Like, Andy went there. He kind of helped sneak me in. And so I'm just hanging there with, like all these older people just looking around like, Jesus Christ. And I had at the time this Iron Cross ring that I was super stoked on because I had all kinds of jewelry and kinds of dumb shit then because such was the aesthetic at the time. And someone who I later found out that night was Stephen O'Malley walks up to me.
Oh shit.
He's like, that ring. I was like, what about it? He's like, he wants it. I turn around and it's Maniac, the singer from Mayhem. I'm like, wait, what? And so like O'Malley's hammered, which is, it's kind of, I've had several fun nights with him where he's been hammered. He's actually really fun drunk. So he's just sitting there like, he doesn't know me. He doesn't give a shit who I am. So he's just badgering me. He's like, give him the ring. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, I mean, I can go get another one. I got on South Street in Philly. So I give Maniac the ring. He has this Mayhem pin that he gives me, and he sits down and like, we just start talking. We talked for hours. I gave him a Krieg CD, and then, like we just were hanging out, and I talked to O'Malley, and I was like, wait a minute, that's the guy that did like the Emperor layouts and, like all this great art and all that. And so like, I just got to sit at this bar and just hang out with all these guys, and they were just super fucking cool. And it turns out that later that night, and I missed this, but in the Moribund room, they were staying in the Ambassador as well. They had Hellhammer up there, and they had Andy. And so there was like this big, like, what's better, Norwegian black metal or American black metal? And so to settle that, they had an arm wrestling contest. And Andy apparently beat Hellhammer. I mean, this is it's all conjecture because I wasn't there. But as I was wandering back to wherever I was staying, which was like, a block or two away, I ran into Necro Butcher and Blasphemer of Mayhem and
Mhm.
Rachel Teagues, who was the Century Media's press person at the time. And they all wanted to know if I could find cocaine for them. And like at this time, like I'm like 19 or 20, like I'd never even smoked weed before. And I was just flabbergasted by this. And it's like, no, no. And then I ran into Hellhammer a little bit later. And I mean, he was drunk, but he was like super, really nice, signed my ticket for me. Just like all like this, like I had a really positive experience with them. And, you know, years later, like I saw them at the Limelight. I think it was them, Demon Sea, Grand Belial's Key, which is kind of funny to hear them on a Mayhem show,
Yeah.
and a few other bands. And like Maniac kind of remembered me, so we talked like very very briefly. But like now, like I'm pretty cool with his wife. He's married to Vivian, who used to be in Gallhammer, so like we occasionally talk on Instagram. So yeah, I mean apparently like he still he knows who I am, and that's just really cool.
That's rad. I mean, all the you're just
Yeah.
rifling off all of these names of who's who. You hear about all these classic lineups. Do you recall any of maybe some great sets that you would have witnessed at that year for the
Oh,
festival?
oh my God, yeah. So Sodom has always been a band that like I can throw that, and that was the main reason why I went that year, because I was in '98. I was super obsessed with thrash and proto black metal. That was like all I was listening to, and so I had to go see Sodom, and they were absolutely incredible. And I got to meet them too. I mean, they did like a meet and greet, and of course, so I stood in line like an asshole, got my CD signed. They were all really really nice. It was Impaled Nazarene's first U.S. show. Um, who else? There's an old black metal band from your way called Ember,
Okay.
and they played, and so they had two demos that were really really good. But by the time they played Milwaukee Metal Fest, the singer no longer liked black metal, so like he was wearing an Earth Crisis shirt, which was highly offensive to me at the time. Now obviously I wouldn't care, but he came out barefoot and he brought a piece of carpet that he danced on. And I remember somebody yelled out an old song title, and he's like, "No, we don't, not today." And they broke up shortly after that because of that. Um, but they're so aesthetically it was unusual, but their performance was really good. Sarcophagus played; they were awesome. Trying to think of who else. I mean, there was just like nonstop that year. It was one of the best fests I ever had a chance to go to.
That's wild. I mean, I even see. I think Sodom is playing Maryland Death Fest this upcoming year, playing like Agent Orange, like in its entirety, perhaps.
Yeah, we'll
I don't
see
know.
about that. I mean, they cancel every time they get
Oh yeah, well there you
these
go.
dates. So I mean, I hope so. I hope that people get a chance. I'm not going to be able to go to that, but I hope people get a chance to see it, because I mean, they were everything that I wanted them to be. But then Destruction played that year as well, and this was right after they did the least successful Human Cannonball record. Which, if you ever get a chance to listen to that on YouTube, and you're just hating yourself, and you won't hate yourself more.
I often do, but yes.
All right, so put that on. It is just absolutely atrocious, and they were so bad. And that was a big bummer because, again, thrash was my shit that year, so I was super excited to see them. I
Yeah.
didn't realize that, they turned into, it's kind of sounded like the first System of a Down record, which is cool if you're System of a Down, but not if you're Destruction. Yeah, I ended up going to Milwaukee in 98, 99, 2000, and I think 2001, but I don't remember.
Yeah, it's kind of wild that like all this stuff is seeing maybe a little bit of a resurgence. I mean, this past year, I didn't get to go. I mean, it's still at the Eagles Club, or like the Rave or whatever you call it now. But just all of these like maybe these bands coming out of the woodwork. Do you have any sort of opinion on that? Like these bands, like you mentioned Weekend Nachos, they're definitely a favorite band of mine. They're coming back to play some shows. I mean, I guess if it feels right, by all means, if you're having fun. But I don't know. I mean, do you see a lot of that going on? It seems like some of these older bands are just kind of coming out and they're like, well, we haven't played in forever. I guess we'll go ahead and dust it off a little bit.
I mean, I'm in no place to judge anybody, because I can't sit and I can hypothesize their motivations for it.
Sure.
But, unless you're actually in the band, you don't know. I think it's great that Weekend Nachos is coming back. They were fantastic live. They were very, very nice to us too. So I'm cool with them, coming back. Hopefully they do some new music. yeah, there's really not a lot of bands that I can think of that really like upset me when I hear that they're coming back. I mean, I got to see Celtic Frost when they did the Monotheist tour, and that was an example of a band that coming back that was really really intense and killer. When Beharit did Engram, that was again like a band that hadn't been around in forever, and you knew that Marco was into like a whole bunch of like weird techno and all that kind of stuff, so you didn't know how this was going to turn out and what the motivation there was, and it ended up being their best record. Profanatica, when Paul came back, the records are fantastic. So I don't know. There really hasn't been anybody that's come back that has disappointed me. I know that there's a ton of bands that do that, especially like old power metal bands or old thrash bands that people get kind of bummed out because it's very obviously a cash grab.
I'm sure that I'm sure I've been one to like, oh, that's dumb. But I think we all have like our band that I would totally, given the chance, like Weekend Nachos came back. So it's like, I'm going to go. Like I bought my ticket already. That's just, there's always a band that's like, all right, I'm going to if I have the opportunity, I would definitely go and catch it. Like if Celtic Frost did that again, like, it's just.
I think the only thing that I can think of that's like a massive cash grab is the Misfits reunion.
Yes.
Yep.
And
no question.
Like when I had a college show, I interviewed Danzig for the Satan's Child record. Very cool dude, which everybody always said what an asshole he was, but he was great. And towards the end, like I was told by his publicist that, don't ask Misfit questions. And so we had like 10 minutes left and we were just kind of shooting the shit. And he goes, okay, so you can ask. And I knew immediately what that meant. So like, let's just start talking about Misfits, and like, just like his dislike for what they're doing to the legacy. I mean, maybe that's part of why he's doing it again, so that he has like kind of control on that. But I mean, those tickets are so expensive whenever they do it.
Yeah. I'm not much of a festival person. They've played, the past couple, what they played a Riot Fest. They've done their big shows of like the thing. And it's just, I much prefer to see a band. Like if I want to enjoy something, I'm not going to get like dragged around and catch like half of their set or something like that. I want to see, if that were my thing, if I was going to go see the Misfits, I want to be able to enjoy it like in a maybe treated concert room perhaps. But yeah, I don't know. It is kind of like makes me scratch my head. Dylan, I don't know if you had.
I saw Jerry Only's Misfits when I was like 18 or 19 years old.
Oh yeah.
I would have made a trip back home, and it was one of the more bizarre things I've ever seen. It was a tiny venue, but it was like, I'm hearing these songs, but okay, I'll take it. I'll take it for what it is. Like it's something, the legacy, I guess, is what it is at this point. And at that point, there was no semblance of any reunion ever happening, because you hear of the infighting of, all three of those guys, mainly Jerry and Glenn. And it's phenomenal. I mean, Doyle came out and did some Danzig tours with like the Blackest of the Black tours that he had for a while. Doyle would come out and they'd do like a Misfits set. But seeing Jerry's Misfits, I think I got to see him with like Robo on drums, and I think Des Cadena was playing guitar. It was wild.
That is pretty cool. I saw them the first, I don't know if you could say reunion, but it was definitely the first reactivation when Michael Graves was with them. It was before the first album that he did even came out. And I saw them at the Trocadero in Philadelphia, and that's kind of like a larger venue. And it was weird because you could see people behind the stage playing additional guitars on top of what they're playing out there.
Damn.
And it was almost like, like are they lip syncing their fucking guitars? I mean, it was really, really weird. And that just kind of put like a sour taste in my mouth for it. And then, years later, I got to see, because Sam Hain's another one that I absolutely love, that if Glenn wants to make money, just reissue those records, for Christ's sake.
I'm surprised that hasn't happened.
Yeah, those records are great.
But they did not a reunion. I guess it was a reunion. It was during the 666 record. They did a tour where they did a Danzig set, and then they did a Sam Hain set. And that was just, Jesus Christ, that was one of the best shows I've ever seen.
Dylan, I don't know if you have any like back history with Judas Iscariot. I didn't even know that. Honestly, this was like the first time I learned that dude even had a last name. Like I thought it was just Judas. I was like, Judas Stevenson. Iscariot, I guess, is the name. But when I heard the song, I don't know if you had any like prior interactions with this band or the song in particular. What were your first thoughts?
So I guess at the early part of the pandemic, that's when Decibel released their US black metal book. And of course, anytime Decibel releases a book, I jump on it because obviously I'm going to find music I've never heard. I'm going to find music that maybe I'm not as familiar with, whatever it may be. And I just read through the entire thing and went, okay, we're going to listen to that band, this band, that band. And I would deep dive the whole catalog, essentially. Like I had plenty of time. I was laid off from work. Like, what else am I going to do?
Yeah.
It's like, all right, it's already kind of like a weird time. Let's just put on this depressive black metal and like go through it. And this track, Neill, you touching on like the comparison to the Dark Throne, like that hit the nail on the head. It is very much that kind of trance-like, kind of primal pounding trip that you take with some of their songs. It definitely feels it. And in this track in particular, I'm an anal retentive listener when it comes to music. So like I listen for every little nuance in it, and hearing the slight transitions in the parts, it really changes the feel of the song just enough that if you're not paying close enough attention, you're not going to catch it. But it definitely just it will change the vibe of the song just in like a quarter of a second.
Yeah, I mean, the riff that I pulled out, I mean, it's very similar to the first riff in the song, but it's just like this one or two like down the note kind of that just really darkens it up. It's already kind of like a really slow and kind of malicious sounding song, and this just makes it like it's like putting a dark cloud on top of it. And there's just something about that. So I mean, it just really, like, you talk about what you like in a riff. A riff is something that for me will like reach in and like grab a part of me. And that right there is one of those riffs that just like, grabs and twists and just really defines the song for me. And it's just like a simple 2-note change.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I got to see Cannibal Corpse on tour recently with Mayhem, and I took a friend of Austin and I's with us, and he's not really familiar with these different genres of music. So I've listened to Cannibal since I was like 14 years old, so like it was like a greatest hits collection. And I know at certain points I'm pretty stiff when it comes to shows. Like I'm just there, I'm kind of staring at it, enjoying it in my head, making sure I don't move to let it be known I have any emotion. And I know at one point instinctively, I just grabbed our buddy and shook him violently during a certain part and just stopped and just went back. It's like, all right, that riff just has that type of like emotive connection with me.
It's like a primal reaction.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What, and you mentioned earlier, I mean, it's not like again, with the outside pressures of like, well, what are they going to do next? I mean, it can be simple. It can be as straightforward as the song, His Eternal Life, like a dream was obliterated. It is primitive, but it's effective. And, I've genuinely, I'd never heard of the song before, but kind of like Dylan, you mentioned, you're in like a 10-minute trance. It's just literally kind of just a drudge of like the tones. I mean, the kind of the driving riff over and over again. I wonder why this song in particular, out of all of the songs that you perhaps could have picked through the discography, why this song in particular? Why does it stick out to you?
Well, I mean, when I was sent over, the idea of pulling out a riff that meant something, I went through like 20 songs in like a half hour.
Yeah.
And it just kept changing, like for, various reasons. And then I was like, well, what riff has a story to it? And obviously, I mean, I can talk about nearly anything at length, not very well, but I'll at least, I'll talk your ear off about it. But so this riff in particular, like it's something that really helped me at a kind of a pivotal time in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I chose it. And what that time was, and we're going to go into some happy things now, is in 2000, my mother died. And so, and it was very sudden. Like I was taking a friend to the train station and I came back home and, she was dead. And so like my father died when I was 15. He died in a plane crash. And so like this basically it left me alone, like I mean, I was quote unquote adult age. I was like 20, 22, I think. So I'm left to like figure out like all these things, like how to plan for a funeral, what to do for estate planning, like all this just like nonsense that like I just wasn't prepared for. And so during the funeral procession, like fortunately I had, some distant relatives that jumped in and helped me. Um, and my mother was buried in Arlington because that's where my father was buried. And so you have to do like this lengthy ass funeral procession through the whole fucking park. And it takes forever. I mean, it's just like you're kind of you get bored halfway through. And for whatever reason, I had this song on and I played it on repeat the entirety of the procession, which was at least an hour. So it really just kind of it helped me just kind of escape the situation. It took me to a different place, and that was one of the things that has made Judas's music important to me throughout my entire life that I've known it. Is just like those little moments like that. Like so that riff, especially that change, focusing on that took me away from a pretty unpleasant situation. And so that's what stuck out. For a riff to be something that I really want to talk at length about, it has to have some kind of story attached to it, some kind of memory for me. And so, I mean, I could have like easily told you, like, there's a riff in the fifth song on Gorgoroth's Pentagram that, they use like this weird flange effect and it's really cool and it changes the whole dynamic of the song and sounds, super bizarre. But I have no emotional, outside of thinking it's an awesome riff, I have no real emotional anchor to that riff. So that's kind of just why I chose this one. Plus, I just wanted to make sure that everybody was having a really nice time when I talked about it. So
I mean, that's special, man. I really did you ever get to tell him that like that song in particular, like whether you divulged like any sort of like personal information? Did you ever disclose like, hey, this was like a riff that really got me, like thank you or anything? I don't know, just hey, this was the riff. If you did anything, this was the one.
oh yeah, no, he knew. I mean, Andy was one of the first people that when he found out my mother died, who called me. Um, Him and Marcus, who was in sarcophagus and then eventually in Forest of Impaled, um, they both invited me out that New Year's. They wanted me to go out to Chicago and hang out there and try to get my mind off everything because my mother died in October. And so, like, I really just I got to fly out there and hang out with them and just really kind of process everything. And so, yeah, no, we had a lot of deep discussion just about like that song and just that experience, and then kind of just the nature of writing music and what that can mean for people and what it means for ourselves as quote unquote artists. I was able to have a lot of really deep conversations with him like that I'm absolutely grateful for the experience.
We've taken so much of your time already, but one question that I know we've asked some artists before is, we like to kind of wrap the show up perhaps with like some recommendations. Kind of jumping off of that, do you feel, are there maybe a few riffs or maybe few particular songs where you feel like you were able to replicate that sort of feeling, like a riff that maybe tells a story or a riff that you're particularly proud of, whether it be on Runer? Obviously, there's a lot of great riffs on this record that came out. Transient, maybe some of the riffs from perhaps older records of your discography. Are there like any riffs in particular that you were like, wow, I can't believe that, man, that again, if I could have done anything at all, at least I wrote this riff in particular?
The kind of riff where you're like, Jesus Christ, I can't believe that actually I wrote that.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'll pull out three. We'll go back to the oldest one first, and that'll be on Black House, the song Without Light, which is actually about my mother dying. And that that was the first time that I'd ever written anything like slow and melancholic. Everything else that I've been writing is generally like pretty, in your face, kind of harsh, blasphemy worship. And so it was the first time that I've ever shown that side of myself, that, quote unquote sensitive side. And so that's something that, like I'll listen back to. It's hard to listen to because, there's a lot of emotion there. But I'll listen back to that and be like, yeah, that's it was difficult to write and it's difficult to listen to. And I think that that's what makes it really, really important to me. The next riff I would say would be the first song on Transient, Order of the Solitary Road. It is the third riff, the riff right before the kind of rock and roll part comes in. And that's actually probably my favorite riff that I've ever written. And it's also directly me trying to emulate Andy's guitar playing. And succeeding. Like it's the first thing that I've ever written where I was like, oh, you know what? That's something that he actually like that would be something that he would conceivably write. And it just has like a lot of power to it. It has a lot of confidence that I didn't think that I would have. When I came out with Transient, I'd just given up. I'd gotten off of a very long time of nervous breakdowns, mental illness, a lot of drug abuse, just a lot of I was homeless. There's just a lot of really fucked up situations. And so Transient was kind of like this whole like rebirth spiritually. And so that riff really represents me at my full potential, I guess, to sound like Dragon Ball Z. And then off of Ruiner, I think the closing track, Lantern in the Key, the third riff, the one that's kind of just really different from anything else on the record. That's just something that that I listen to that and I'm like, it's super simple. It's just a few notes, but I can't believe that I'm the one that wrote that. And that, once like we did all the, like I wanted like this kind of effect on the guitars. I wanted the drums to sound like this. I wanted things to fade in and out, and just listening to it, like it's really cool. It's something that I can listen to and be very proud of. So yeah, those are my three.
That's awesome. And I'm so happy to, hear the kind of the span of time, even more recently on that last track. I can't thank you enough for sitting with us this evening to talk about the record. Ruiner is out now on Profound Lore Records. You do have some shows coming up. I hope you fill out that support slot on some of those dates. November 10th through the 12th, that you're going to be in Brooklyn on the 10th, Rhode Island on the 11th, and Philly on the 12th. Is there anywhere people can follow you for updates? Do you have any other things that you'd like to plug? The floor is completely yours.
So you can follow me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is, let me look. That's how good so it's Black House Industries. That's Black_House_Industries. You can follow Krieg on Facebook. We have a Bandcamp page. And I'm going to use this platform as a very appropriate place to announce something, which is we're figuring out all the details for our first show of 2024. It's going to be on January 6th. And it's going to be in Lombard, Illinois. So not too
at the Brower House?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Oh man, that's like really, really close to my campus. I'll definitely be there. So it's going to be January 6th?
January 6th. Yeah, we'll be announcing everything fully in the next few days or so, but we got asked to take part in that. It's part of a tour.
Okay.
See what other bands, Knocklich, I can't pronounce it. Canadian band. Fantastic. I'm so stoked just to even get a chance to see them. And multiple other bands I can't pronounce. I'm scrolling through my messages real quick just to grab it. So Knocklich, Balzavat, and Eisenblast. Balzavat's killer. It's kind of like almost like oi and folk meets black metal. It's super fucking cool.
Damn.
I don't know who Eisenblast is. I gotta check them out. But so yeah, that will be there on January 6th.
That'll be awesome. I'll definitely be around. I gotta say hi.
Yeah, that just came together last week. Paul wrote and said, hey, do you want to do a show? And I was kind of hoping that we'd be doing Metal Thread again. So
yeah.
That. And then he's like, oh, well, it's this. And Knocklich, I can't even pronounce the goddamn band, but they're fantastic, really creepy, bizarre Canadian black metal. So I'm just stoked just to even get to see them.
Yeah.
And then also I know there's a Portillo's not super far from there.
Oh, I should have asked you, man. What's your order?
It's been so long. I haven't had Portillo's in God, like 12, 13 years. It would always be, like 2 Chicago dogs and fries. Or if I'm, feeling fancy, I'll get an Italian beef, but I have to make sure that it's, dipped.
Yeah.
And I don't know if a show night is the appropriate time to get that messy, but
Yeah.
I mean, Chicago just has some of the best food in the country. So that's what I'm really looking forward to. Back in the day, I'd be looking forward to going because Chicago also has some of the best cocaine in the country. And like, and my entire band, we were talking about that because, we would, the last few times we played Chicago, like we just go get completely hammered. And this time around, everybody's, we're all old and clean now. So we're just excited about going and having some good hot dogs, which is kind of lame, but also awesome.
It's addicting in its own right, man. Some of that beef au jus, it'll get you hooked.
And it's probably just as bad for me as anything I'd be putting up my nose.
No doubt.
There you go.
No doubt. Dude, thank you so much again. Check out all the things for Krieg, Runer, all the shows coming up. I'm super, super happy that this is out. I'm so happy for you. Congratulations on the new record. And I wish you nothing but continued success. For Neill, myself, and Dylan, you've been listening to Riff Worship. We'll be back next week talking about more riffs.